Hey guys, welcome to the channel. This is the second part of What If Issei Was Broken Beyond Repair. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe the channel and like the video. Also share this video with your friends. Let's start the video. Issei was walking home after his meeting with the orc. After Diedrig's statement, Rias said that she would like to prevent Issei from taking his own life, if possible. The others agreed to help as well. Issei gave a long sigh. He just didn't understand as to why she'd like to help someone like him. He was even surprised by her offer, turning him into a devil and joining her peerage.
Issei thought about it, but in the end, shook his head, declining her offer. He still remembers her disappointed look. But she understood and let him go, but she also said that the offer would still stand.
He took out his spare key and opened his door. He closed it and locked it. He let his school bag drop to the floor as he looked at the body in front of him. Since tomorrow was Saturday, he could go and bury her body near the end of the day. He went to his fridge and grabbed milk. He put it on his table and went to one of the cupboards, grabbing a bowl. He then grabbed some chocolate-flavored cereal. He poured the cereal in the bowl. The milk then followed. He grabbed a spoon from a drawer and went to sit on the sofa, opening the TV. As he sat down, his mind wandered to one of the agreements that Diedrig accepted. Rias accepted the fact that he didn't want to become a devil, but she then proposed in joining the occult research club. Issei was about to decline, but Diedrig beat him to it, accepting the offer. Partner, as much as I want to believe that you can kill Kokebiel by yourself, I am having new doubts as well. Without help, then it would take months, maybe years for us to find Kokebiel alone. But since they are devils and enemies of the Fallen, then it could work as an advantage for us. They hunt down a Fallen and they contact you. You try and get some information and then you kill them at the end. Sounds good to you, partner? Diedrig explained his reason to Issei. Issei thought about it for a while, but he agreed in the end. True, he is good at working alone, but him finding Kokebiel alone might take a few years. But with help, it could lower the time of the search. After finishing his cereal, he looked at the clock on the wall. The time was 10:43. He put the bowl in the sink and filled it with water. He then went upstairs to take a bath. He took his clothes off with the bandages. Before entering, he looked at the wounds that were caused by Rainier. They were all closed. Since he was now a dragon, his wounds heal 3 times faster than the original human time. He entered the bath and began washing himself. He, you can take all the medicine you want, but you will never get rid of me. I will always be in your self-conscious. I will always be here to torment you. Ha ha ha, I can see your struggle. Nothing escapes from me, not even you. Issei clutched the side of his head as he exited the bath. He knew he forgot to take something these past 2 days. He forgot to take his medicine. After the incident with Kokebiel, Issei's uncle took him to the doctor. After an examination, the doctor said that he was suffering from depression, extreme paranoia and maybe dementia. But the most worrying was schizophrenia. His uncle asked how the schizophrenia was triggered. The doctor said that it might have been during the incident. There is no known single cause of schizophrenia, said the doctor to Issei's uncle. The uncle then asked if there were any other illnesses or trauma that he could be aware of. One issue that the doctor said to be careful on was of a panic attack, since he did experience the death of his family. The doctor then gave Issei some pills. He said to take 3 every day, at breakfast, during lunch and at dinner. The good thing, Issei managed to get self-control over his panic attacks over the last few years, which caused them to be quite rare. His schizophrenia was the only serious problem, aside from his depression, extreme paranoia and maybe his dementia. Issei dried himself in a towel and quickly went downstairs. He grabbed a cup and filled it with water. Issei then opened one of the drawers and grabbed his bottle of Thorazine. He put one down his throat and soon drank the water. He, you can't get rid of me. See you soon, Issei, ha 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 ha. It was all that the voice said before going silent. Issei gave a small sigh of relief as the voice finally quieted down. For now at least. Issei went upstairs to his room and fell on his bed. He soon fell into a deep slumber. Inside Issei's dream, Issei's eyes snapped wide open. The first thing he noticed was that he was in the school's courtyard. He looked around, but there was nothing. Only the school and the blue skies with white clouds. Suddenly, the sky turned red and the clouds turned black. Issei then felt a sharp pain on his chest. He looked down and saw a sword that was impaled in his chest. Issei shakily turned and saw no one. So the brat from 10 years ago is still alive. I must say I'm impressed, a voice said. Shadows began to form a figure in front of Issei. First were the legs, then the arms, then the torso and then the wings. The man had long black hair, red eyes and from what Issei could count 10 black feathery wings on his back. Issei recognized him easily. It was Kokebiel. It was what I expected from the holder of the boosted gear and the host of the Red Dragon Emperor. But I want to at least get a good fight out of you, Kokebiel shouted with a grin on his face.
Before Issei could blink, he found himself on the floor, deep cuts all over his body. He saw Kokebiel walking towards him with a grin on his face. Kokebiel had blood coming down his forehead and his lip was also bleeding. I must say that I'm somewhat disappointed in you. I expected you to at least put up a good fight. But it seems I expected a bit too much. Oh well, this time you won't be able to revive yourself, so that is another brat down the drain. Kokebiel said as he summoned a light spear in his hand. He raised his hand in the air and impaled it into Issei's head.
End of dream. Issei gasped as he sat up on his bed. Sweat was trickling down his forehead as he let out short shaky breaths. Calm down partner. It was just another nightmare. But this one seemed more realistic. But, let's not think about that right now. Breathe, try to relax. Diedrich instructed Issei on what to do during his small panic attack. Issei gave a sigh of relief, feeling better now. But he agreed with Diedrich on one thing. That nightmare seemed realistic. It was almost as if it was trying to tell him something. But he decided that it was another nightmare, so it probably meant nothing. Issei stood up and went to the bathroom. He took a quick shower and went downstairs to make himself breakfast. He had enough to make himself a bowl of rice, so he probably should go to the store and buy more. Issei then filled a cup with water and took one Thorazine pill. He put it in his mouth and drank the water. He gave a sigh and sat down on his couch, rubbing his eyes. Since there was no school today, Issei decided to spend the day home and then bury Reinare's body at night. But for now, he'll go buy some stuff that he needed. He took his key and exited his house. As he was walking, Issei still couldn't get his mind off that dream he saw. It was strange. He felt like he should be more cautious now. Issei managed to push his thoughts to the back of his head as he entered the store. After buying the stuff that he needed, he exited the store and walked back to his house. Stand still. I'll make you feel better. Trust me. Issei heard a voice say from right across the street.
Issei looked at the direction of the voice and saw a girl kneel down with her hands extended towards a bow that was about 8 years old. The girl was wearing a white veil on her head and a black teal nun outfit. She had long blonde hair. Suddenly a green glow emitted from the girl's hands.
After a few seconds, the boy stood up with a happy grin on his face. He looked down at the nun. Wow, that was amazing. Thank you, Mrs. The boy said. He then ran off. The nun stared at the bow with a happy smile herself. Issei was surprised by her healing ability. He realized that it was a sacred gear and a pretty powerful one as well. If my guess is correct partner, then her sacred gear is twilight healing. And just like your boosted gear, hers is pretty rare, Diedrich said. Issei crossed the road and approached the kneeled nun. The nun looked up and saw Issei staring at her. See, can I help you with something? The nun asked slowly, a stutter in her voice. Issei extended his hand to her. The nun smiled and gladly accepted his hand. Now that Issei was closer to her, he saw that she had green eyes. The nun looked at him with a smile. Thank you. Let me introduce myself, my name is Asia Argento. It's a pleasure to meet you. What's your name? Asia asked with a small bow. Issei gave a small bow as well. Issei cleared his throat, but ended up coughing heavily. It's been a while since he cleared his throat from the mucus that he had since the last 10 years that he spoke. Ah, are you okay? Do you need help? Asia screamed in worry. Issei only raised his hand as he stopped to cough. He gave a sigh of relief as he recovered from his cough attack. Thank God, you're okay. Now can you please give me your name so that God can give you his love? Asia asked with a relived smile. Issei pointed at his throat, or more importantly, his vocal cords. He pointed at them and shook his head. What does that mean? You can't speak? Asia asked. Issei shook his head. You haven't spoken in a while? Asia asked once more. This time, Issei nodded. So your voice is basically gone. How sad. Asia said in a sad tone. Issei nodded as if saying thanks for the concern. He then started to walk away from Asia. Ah, wait. Asia shouted. Issei turned to look at her with a raised brow. Since I'm new in town and I don't know my way, can you possibly show me the way towards the nearest church? There's someone I have to meet there. Asia asked shyly, with a small blush on her face. Issei had a small feeling that it was more than one person who she was going to meet, but he still decided to help her. He nodded his head and walked back to her, mentioning with his finger to follow him. Asia nodded and followed Issei. She looked up at him and stared at the two scars that were visible. The one on his neck and the one on his right eye. She wanted to ask him how he got them, but she knew he wouldn't answer her, since it's been a while since he last spoke. Suddenly, Issei heard a loud grumble. He turned towards Asia, who was holding her stomach with her hands, while her head was down in embarrassment, a huge blush on her cheeks. Issei could have sworn that he felt the side of his left lip inching up to a barely noticeable smile, which surprised him. He didn't even know that he had the ability to smile. But, it lasted for only a millisecond, so he still has a way to go. He mentioned for Asia to follow him to a fast food court. Issei bought himself a cheeseburger. He bought another cheeseburger for Asia. They decided to sit outside. As Issei was eating his burger, he noticed Asia looking at her food. He tapped her shoulder so he could get her attention. Asia looked at Issei and Issei stared at her with a raised brow. This may sound like a stupid question, but how do you eat this? I've never actually seen this type of food, Asia said, looking to the left shyly. Issei then grabbed his cheeseburger and Asia looked at him. Issei then took a bite out of the burger and chewed slowly. He then looked at Asia. Is that how you eat it? Asia asked. Issei only nodded. Asia grabbed the burger with her hands and took a small bite. Her eyes widened as she looked at the burger with stars in her eyes. This is so delicious. I never ate something as delicious as this, Asia said as she took another bite of her burger. Just like before, Issei's lips went up to another barely noticeable smile. It lasted for only half a millisecond. After they ate their lunch, Issei then led her to the nearby church. Once outside, Asia turned to Issei with a smile on her face. Thank you for showing me the way to the church. I hope we meet again soon. May God be with you, Asia said as she entered the church. Issei was a little suspicious about what was in that church. He knew that there was more than one person that Asia was going to meet, but what were they? Were they fallen angels? It looks like you worry too much about little Asia. Why is that? You never cared for anyone but your own, why start caring now? Issei shook his head. There was no way that an innocent girl like her would associate with monsters like the fallen angels. Maybe she really was just going to meet another priest. But for whatever reason, he decided to agree with the voice. Issei decided to push his worries away and decided to go back home. There was nothing else to do. Hello Issei. Didn't expect to see you here. Issei heard a voice from behind him. Issei looked over his shoulder and saw Rias walking towards him. She wore the same attire that she wore yesterday. Issei raised his shopping bag, saying that he only came here to shop. I just came here to take a small walk for fresh air. Also, you could say that I was watching you a little. And I saw you walking with that nun. Rias said nervously as she saw the look that Issei gave her once she said that she was watching him. I just want you to know that nuns are associated with most angels, and since angels are enemies to us devils, then I would suggest that you stay away from her, Rias continued. Issei then extended his right arm forwards. Rias Gremory. Of course, we know that devils are enemies of angels and fallen angels are the same. But you forget, Issei is no devil. We may be associated with you, but that does not mean that we are at your side, Diedrich said. Then on which side are you? Rias asked. That is a stupid question. You should already know that we are on no one's side, expect our own. Of course, we appreciate the help that you will give us, but other than that, you are just a temporary ally. After Issei's quest is over, you know what will happen, Diedrich said. And I already said that I'll do what I can in order to prevent that, Rias said seriously. You can try, but I doubt anything will change my partner's choice at this point, Diedrich said. Issei then looked up at the sky. He saw that the sky was starting to get orange. He was quickly reminded that he should go bury Rainier in a few hours. Well, I think it's about time we depart. There is a fallen angel that we have to bury, Diedrich said. Issei started to walk away. Can I help you with that? Rias asked hopefully. Issei looked at her a little strangely. After a small while, he sighed and nodded his head, mentioning to follow him. Rias smiled and followed Issei. Issei was more than comfortable with the walking in silence. He actually preferred it. When they arrived at Issei's house, Issei took his key out and opened the door. The first thing that caught Ria's attention was of course the dead fallen angel that was near the entrance. The second thing that caught her attention and worried her a little was a bottle of medicine that was on the kitchen's dining table. Issei mentioned her to wait here, and he went upstairs, leaving Rias alone for the moment. Ria's curiosity got the better of her as she approached the dining table. She grabbed the medicine tab and looked at the label. From what she could tell, the medicine was named Thorazine. She then heard steps coming down the stairs. Rias quickly put the medicine to where she found it and went back to where she was before. When Issei came downstairs, he was holding a large bag and a shovel. Issei grabbed Rainier and stuffed her in the bag. He closed the bag and tossed it over his shoulder. "Do you know where you want to bury her?" Rias asked. "There is a small yard behind Issei's house. It would be a good place to bury her, just as long as nobody sees," Diedrich said. "I can easily cover you," Rias said, confident. Diedrich said nothing. They both went to the backyard through a door in the living room. Issei began to dig down a small hole. Once he was sure that it was deep enough, he grabbed the bag with Rainier inside and tossed her inside the hole. Issei. Can I ask you a question?" Rias asked, nervous. Issei stopped pouring dirt in the hole and looked at Rias. Rias was sweating a little. She didn't know how he would react when she tells him that she saw him medicine. She gave a nervous sigh to calm herself. "What is Thorazine? I saw the medicine on your dining table, so I got curious," Rias asked. Once she looked at Issei, she instantly regretted asking him. He was just staring at her, a very dead look in his eyes. He finished pouring dirt in the hole. Once giving the pile 2 pats with the shovel, Issei turned his attention back at Rias, slowly approaching her. Once Issei gave 2 pats on the pile of dirt with his shovel, he slowly walked to Rias with a dangerous look in his eyes. Rias took a few steps backwards. "Issei, please tell me," Rias said with a ting of fear in her voice. Issei ignored her and extended his hand to the right, his boosted gear appearing. Psi Rias Gremory, have you ever heard of a thing called privacy of personal space? I'm sure your parents raised you correctly, so they must have taught you a few things. But, since you found out, then I guess it's only fair that I tell you. And partner, I can tell that you want to kill her. Please refrain from doing so," Diedrich said. Issei gave a sigh in disappointment that he couldn't kill her, but complied with Diedrich, for now. Now, after getting his scars, Issei was rushed to the thing you human call hospital. After checking him and making sure that all his injuries were treated, they examined him to see if he had any sort of illnesses. After that, the doctor said that he had depression, which I'm sure all of you have noticed by now. He has extreme paranoia, panic attacks, and he may have dementia. But his most serious one is probably why he has to take these pills, Diedrich said. What does he have that make him have to take those pills? Rias asked a little hesitantly. He has schizophrenia, Diedrich said. What? Rias screamed in shock. No reason to be loud. Most of the time, my partner controls it. By taking those pills, it keeps the voice quiet for about 3 hours. He takes one every morning during breakfast, one during lunch and one after dinner. Then what about his dementia? Rias asked, recovering from her shock. From what I have witnessed over the last 10 years, my partner never had a change of personality. He was just quiet as always. From what the doctors said, my partner had vascular dementia. He has yet to show the other symptoms, such as memory problems, trouble speaking or understanding speech, recognizing sights and sounds, being confused or agitated, and a problem of walking and having frequent falls. Diedrich said. So he might not have dementia after all? Rias asked. That may be so, yes. Diedrich said. Diedrich then went silent, waiting for Ria's response. Well, dementia or no dementia, I promise that I'll stay by your side, Issei. Me and the others are going to help you through with your depression and with your revenge. But I regret to say that your battle with schizophrenia is yours. I can't do anything about that. Rias finished regrettably. Issei stood there, a little surprised. He thought that she would run away from him, saying to never approach her again. But instead, she'll stay close by his side. Though he still shouldn't probably trust her. She might have said that, but she might end up stabbing him in the back. So Issei only nodded in thanks, but it was probably fake. Rias smiled with a small blush on her face. She then spread her devilish wings and flew away. Issei sighed and went inside his house. He went to his fridge and opened it, grabbing an apple. He opened the television and sat down on the couch, taking a bite out of the apple. After a small while, his mind began to travel back to the nun that he helped today. Just being with her for about 2 hours, she managed to make him smile for the first time in 10 years. Even if it was for a millisecond, it was still a smile nonetheless. But then, his mind traveled to the church that he took her. Something seemed kind of off about that place. It was like something dark and evil were behind those doors of the church. Who knows, he might just be overreacting about the whole situation, but still, it's okay to ponder. Issei rubbed his one eye and closed the television. He stood up and filled a cup with water. He put the pill in his mouth and drank the water. Issei went upstairs and took a shower. He then went to his bedroom to get himself some sleep. The next day, Issei woke up, blinking a few times at the rays of sunlight hitting his face. Just like 2 days ago, no nightmare. He yawned quietly and got out of bed. He went downstairs and cooked some fried pork with ginger, rice and miso soup. After finishing breakfast, he took his medicine and sat on his couch, wondering what to do today. He could either go for a walk around town to relax a little bit or try and find Asia. After questioning his choices, he decided to go look for Asia. He took his key with him and exited his house. His first target was of course where he first saw her, and that was the park. After arriving at the park, he saw her sitting on one of the benches, just looking around. He approached her silently. Issei tapped her shoulder once, making her jump in surprise. Once she saw who it was, she relaxed and smiled.
"Ah, I've been looking for you. I wanted to see you again," Asia said shyly.
Issei looked at her with a little bit of surprise behind his eye. He suppressed the urge to smile. "I wanted to go have lunch with you once more. Is that okay with you?" Asia asked with a smile and blush. Issei nodded and mentioned for her to follow him. "Could we eat at the same place where you first treated me? I enjoyed the food," Asia said with a happy smile. Issei only nodded. After arriving at the burger joint they went yesterday, they ordered their burgers. Asia ordered a cheeseburger like last time, while Issei bought a teriyaki burger. I know you haven't spoken in a while, but I was wondering if I could maybe heal your throat," Asia said, looking to the left. Issei looked at her. He thought about being able to talk again. But in the end, he shook his head, saying no. "Why not?" Asia asked. Issei only shrugged his shoulders. He didn't know why he refused to let her heal him, but he thought it was for the best. After finishing their lunch, Issei and Asia walked around the town for a bit. Since Asia was new in town, it was a good chance to show her a little bit of the city. After walking for about 10 minutes, Asia suddenly stopped and looked at what looked to be an arcade. Issei stopped walking once he noticed that Asia wasn't besides him. He turned back and saw her looking at the arcade. "I haven't seen an arcade before. I have heard of them, but haven't actually seen one. Can we go in?" Asia asked with hopeful eyes. Issei nodded and led her inside the arcade. Once inside, Asia's eyes light up at the sight. There were many types of racing games, classic games and many more. "This is amazing," Asia said with excitement. Issei looked at her and then looked at the ground. He smiled for a second and then went back to his normal depressed look. After showing Asia around and playing a few games, it was time for them to leave. Asia then suddenly stopped and looked at the claw crane. Issei looked at her and saw her staring at a doll inside the machine. "Ah, that doll is so cute," Asia said with a smile. Issei walked up next to her and saw the doll that she was staring. He pulled out a coin and inserted it inside the machine. He grabbed the joystick and moved the crane on top of the doll Asia wanted. He pushed a green button and the crane slowly lowered on top of the doll. The crane grabbed the doll and moved it towards a hole in the lower right corner. The crane let the doll drop in the hole. Issei grabbed it from the small door at the bottom of the machine and gave it to Asia. "Thank you very much, Issei," Asia said with a happy smile on her face as she hugged her new doll. Issei nodded at her and started to walk towards the exit. Again, he noticed Asia not following him. He looked behind him and saw Asia still hugging her doll, smiling and looking at the floor. But her smile wasn't the smile of someone happy. She had a sad smile on her face. Issei approached her slowly. Once he was close, Asia looked up at him. "Hey, are we friends?" Asia asked, looking straight into his eyes.
Issei looked at her weirdly for a second, wondering as to why she would ask such a question. But nonetheless, he nodded.
Asia looked at him for a second, still smiling sadly. She then looked at her doll. "I'm sorry for asking such a question. When I was born, I didn't know who my mother or my father was. I was an orphan. After being given the sacred gear, twilight healing, I became the holy priestess. Wait, you do know what a sacred gear is, right? Asia asked, a little worried. Issei nodded. How do I know that you are not lying? Asia asked. Issei looked around and saw that nobody was around them. He extended his right hand forward and his boosted gear appeared. Asia gave a real smile this time, but it quickly went back to the sad one she was wearing earlier. After becoming the holy priestess, I met a devil. I don't remember his name though. Anyway, I found him at the blink of death and I had no other choice but to heal him. After the nuns learned about me healing a devil, they banished me from the church. I have been traveling ever since. Asia finished sadly. Issei looked at her, signs of pity evident in his eyes. He then walked up to Asia and put his hands on her shoulders. This action caused Asia to look up at him with wide eyes. Issei then moved one of his hands to the back of her neck and pulled her close, hugging her. Asia was a little surprised by Issei's action, but she was happy at the same time. They stayed there hugging for a couple of minutes, Issei deciding to break apart. Asia was a little disappointed that the hug was finished. But she gave a happy smile nonetheless. Thank you, Issei. Thank you for listening to me, and thank you for being my first friend. Asia said, tears of happiness trickling down her face. Issei wiped her tears with his fingers and gave her another quick hug. He then grabbed her hand and they walked out of the arcade, holding hands. It might have not been the most exciting day, but it was a happy day, because Issei now had a new friend. Issei exited the arcade with Asia in hand. It might have not been the most exciting day, but it was a happy day, because Issei now had a new friend he could probably rely on. They were walking towards the church that Issei left her off last time. But, he felt like something was off, just like last time. He felt something evil was inside that church. He wanted to tell himself that it was nothing, but he couldn't shake it off. Suddenly, a man wearing a pale violet trench coat over a white dress shirt with a matching ascot, black pants and shoes, and a black fedora came up to them. Issei could not see his eyes, since the fedora covered them, but he saw that he had black hair. Asia, what are you doing? I thought we said that you were forbidden from leaving the church, the man said sternly. I am sorry Danasuke. I wanted to meet him one last time before, Asia began, but stopped. This caused Issei to look at Asia with a curious expression. She was hiding something from him, obviously. But what exactly was it? He decided that now was not the best time to ponder on it. He stood in front of Asia protectively. Do you think that you, a lowly human, can protect her from a fallen angel such as myself? Danasuke said as he extended his wings. Issei then remembered that other fallen angel, Rainier. She might nay allied with this fallen. Of course, he wasn't going to tell him that he was the one that killed her. Fallen angel Danasuke. A voice was heard through Issei's right hand. This surprised Asia and Danasuke. Issei extended his hand and revealed the boosted gear. The boosted gear, the Red Dragon Emperor, Danasuke whispered in shock. Yes, it is I, but now it's not the time to be shocked by my appearance with my new host. Now on to business. I would like to ask you an easy question. And since you're a fallen, then you can give an answer. Where is your Governor Kokebiel hiding? Diedrich asked. Everything went quiet. It was like time froze all of a sudden, until Danasuke burst out laughing like a complete maniac. Ha 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 ha. Why the hell should I answer to you? You think I'm scared of you or something? Danasuke asked. No, I'm not asking you to be afraid, but you definitely should be. You have no idea what kind of punishment awaits you, Diedrich said. I don't have time for this shit. Asia. We're leaving now. Danasuke shouted at the nun. Asia hesitantly nodded and started to walk away from Issei. She didn't walk far. Issei grabbed her hand. Once she turned around, she saw Issei shaking his head, saying, don't go. Asia gave a sad smile to Issei. It's okay, you don't have to be sad. Everything will be okay. Asia said, but she and Issei knew that none of what she said was true. Issei didn't know what to do. He could let her go and never see her again, or he could fight for her. Partner, for today you should let her go. I know it's going to be a difficult thing to do, since you bonded quite easily with her. But we will come for her tomorrow and save her. Plus, I feel that he is not alone in that church. I sense a few more fallen and maybe exorcists. It would be wise to retreat for now. Diedrich said inside Issei's head. Issei hesitantly let go of Asia's hand. She gave him one last sad smile and then walked towards the fallen angel. Donasek gave a smirk of victory towards Issei, in which he glared at. Once Asia was close to Donasek, he pushed her forward. Walk faster. Donasek demanded as he turned his back to Issei and walked away with Asia. Issei stared at their retreating form. They soon disappeared behind the doors of the church. Issei stared at the door in which Asia and Donasek entered. He boiled his hands into fists, a few bones cracking. He was not going to let anything bad happen to her. Tomorrow is going to be a hell of a day. Once Issei arrived home, he opened his door and went to his kitchen. He took his medicine and looked up at the clock on the wall. It was 7:57. Issei heard his stomach growl in hunger. He made himself a bowl of cereal for tonight. Once he finished, he put his bowl in the sink and made his way upstairs. He took a quick shower and went to bed. Inside Issei's dream, Issei's eyes snapped open. He looked around the area that he was in. From what he could tell by a cross that was in the center in the room and from the chandeliers that were on the ceiling, he was inside a church. He looked around a little more and noticed a few dead bodies. He walked up to one and saw that he had white hair. He was dressed in clerical clothing. He had a deep hole on the top of his head and his brain was inside his ears and his mouth. Probably something heavy hit him on the top of his head which caused his brain to go inside his ears and mouth. The rest of the bodies were exorcists and two other fallen angels, which were both female, but he didn't recognize them. Issei then saw a door behind the cross. He went through the door and saw a pair of stairs going down. Once he reached the bottom, he saw the fallen angel that he met today, Donasek, lying in a puddle of his own blood. From what Issei could tell, one of his wings was torn off, his eyeball was almost missing from its socket and his throat was sliced open. Issei then looked in front of him and widened his eyes. He saw Asia, curled up in a corner, her knees on her chest. She was looking at him with teary eyes and a horrified expression. Issei stared to approach her. Don't come closer, you monster. Please, spare me. Asia screamed at him in fear. Issei stopped dead in his tracks. He felt his heart break a little. He then remembered the bodies that were upstairs in the church and Donasek's dead body. Was he, the one who did all of this? He tried to tell her that he didn't remember doing all of this. He wanted to tell her, but he couldn't. He was hurting. The last person that probably ever cared for him might have just left him for good. Asia looked at his hurt expression. She looked to her left, not wanting to look inside his eyes anymore. Please, just go. Never come here again. I don't want to see you anymore, Asia said in a hurt voice. That was it. He tried to tell himself that this was not real. That he'll soon wake up in his bed and go through a day in school like nothing ever happened. But yet his mind told him something else. This is reality. He remembered going to sleep. He remembered sleep embracing him. Yet this felt real. Too real for his liking. He, I told you, to not get too attached to someone. Now look at you, you're pathetic, the voice said inside Issei's head. Issei clutched his head, wishing for the voice to leave him alone, but it isn't that simple. Why do you keep fighting me? Why do you continue to fight your true nature? Just embrace it. Embrace the fact that you are a monster, the voice said. Issei began thrashing left and right, breathing heavily. Oh, now I see, the reason that you don't accept me, I know it, the voice said, chuckling. Issei fell to his knees. Is the reason that you don't accept me because you're afraid? The voice asked. Issei now saw nothing but darkness. End of dream. Issei gasped and fell of his bed. One of his hands went on his throat as he struggled to breathe. His face turned as red as a tomato from the lack of oxygen. Partner, relax. Everything is okay. It wasn't real. The dream was not real. Deep breaths, partner, deep breaths. Diedrich shouted at his host. After a few seconds, Issei could finally breathe normally. He breathed heavy breaths as he laid down on the floor. He then picked himself up and headed towards the bathroom. That was his second panic attack, 2 days in a row now. With each nightmare, he had a panic attack. He opened his bathroom door and looked at his reflection. Not much had changed. He was still a little red though. It was going to fade away as soon as he reached school. He exited his bathroom and dressed in his school uniform. He went downstairs and made himself some rice and orange juice. After finishing his breakfast, he took his medicine. Since he was going to have lunch at school, it might be a good idea to take the medicine with him. And so he did. He put the Thorazine inside his school bag. He exited his house and locked the door with his key. He stuffed the key inside his pocket and made his way to Kuo Academy. Once arriving, he saw once again that the perverted duo were once again being chased by the kendo club. He ignored the commotion and made his way to his classroom. Once reaching the stairs, he was stopped by the Prince of Kuo himself, Kiba. "Issei, Rias told us about the medicine that you take. I want to say that we'll try and help you through this. We are after all friends, right?" Kiba asked, flashing Issei one of his smiles. Issei looked at him for a few seconds, he then nodded. "Also, come to the clubroom at the end of school. There is something that Rias wants to tell us," Kiba said once more, before walking up the stairs, going to his own classroom. Issei soon followed. He entered his classroom and took his seat. He waited patiently for the bell to ring. Don't come any closer, you monster. Please spare me." He heard Asia's voice from the dream, repeating those 9 cruel words to him. He shook his head. He wanted to believe that the dream was just, a dream. But he couldn't shake off the feeling that maybe, it's an event from the future. Dreams can sometimes show you moments of what you are going to do tomorrow. Issei sighed as he heard the bell finally ring. He looked to his right and saw Mrs. Keiko enter the classroom, books in her hands. "Good morning, class. Today we are going to be learning about ancient Greek mythology, mostly on the gods of Olympus and some of the ancient creatures in Greek mythology." Mrs. Keiko explained today's lesson. Issei decided to pay at least a little bit of attention, since Greek mythology was an interesting subject, so to speak. At lunch, Issei decided to not have lunch today, since he wasn't hungry. He decided to go to the clubroom and wait until the bell rings. Once arriving, H opened the door to see everyone but Rias in the room. "Hello Issei, would you like some tea?" Akeno asked with a smile. Issei nodded. He needed something to drink if he was going to take his medicine. Once the tea was finished, Akeno placed it on the coffee table. Issei nodded at her in thanks. Before he could take out his medicine, he saw someone standing in front of him. Issei couldn't see his or her face. It was covered by cloth. The cloth was wrapped around every single strand of hair. "Issei, I know the reason that you don't want to accept who you really are, but ever so slowly, you will embrace me. It only takes time. Just you wait. Just you wait," the person in front of him said. Just like that, Issei's breathing quickened. He didn't want to accept it. He doesn't want to embrace it. "Issei? Issei, can you hear me?" a female voice asked him. Issei snapped back to reality and saw that Akeno was staring at him with a worried expression. Kiba was also staring at Issei, worried. Kaneko, though, did not pay any attention at what was happening in the room and just continued to eat her sweets. Issei looked at Akeno questionably. "Once I gave you the tea, your breathing quickened and you put your face in your palms, hyperventilating. Are you okay? Is something bothering you?" Akeno asked. Issei gave a sigh and shook his head. "Is it maybe, the voice inside your head?" Akeno asked hesitantly. Issei looked at her. He then remembered what Kiba said to him at the stairs this morning. He nodded his head. "Issei, don't let it tell you what to do. This is your own body. You can do whatever you want with it," Akeno said, Kiba nodding in the back. Just then, the bell rang, signaling the end of lunchtime. Issei quickly pulled out his medicine and drank the tea, the pill coming after. Everyone watched him as he did so, feeling a slight wave of pity for the young man. They all exited the clubroom and went to their respective classrooms. After school, at the clubroom, everyone was now assembled in the clubroom. Rias looked at all of them with a smile on her face. "Now, that everyone is here, I would like to tell you why I told you all to come here." Rias began. She stopped to take a sip of her tea. "I got a massage from the Archduke. A stray had been spotted nearby. He told us to eliminate him," Rias said, standing up. "Let's go, everyone," Rias said, walking out of the clubroom. "Yes, President," the rest said, except Issei. They reached the area where the stray was. In the outskirts of town, in an old warehouse. "The smell of blood," Kaneko said, covering her nose. Issei looked at her with a raised brow, then shrugged his shoulders and turned his attention back to the warehouse. Once entering, they saw that the warehouse had a lot of wooden boxes in it and a lot of dust. Issei heard Kaneko sniff as she breathed in some dust. "Ah, now that I have remembered, Issei, this would be a very good opportunity for you to see how devils fight. Have you ever heard of the game chess?" Rias asked. Issei nodded. "Then as you know, in chess every piece has its trait," Rias said. Issei looked confused at what she said. Rias noticed his confusion and decided to explain it to him a little more simply. Let me teach you some history. During the Great War, a lot of lives were lost from the three sides. Mostly devils. We lost a lot of pure-blooded clans. But, one of our Maos, Beelzebub, created the evil pieces, based on the game. Rias explained. Issei nodded in understanding. Suddenly, the ground shook. Rias turned her attention towards the sound. Stray Devil Visor, we have come to eliminate you. Rias said seriously, though keeping a smile on her face. You, eliminate me? Don't make me laugh, little girl. I'll paint your face the same color as you hair, Visor said as she lounged forwards. Yuto. Rias shouted to the blonde boy. On it, President, Kiba said as he summoned his sword and jumped at the stray. Now, where was I? Oh yes, I remembered. Yuto is my knight. A knight specializes in speed mostly. Rias explained Yuto's trait as a knight. Visor tried to impale him with a spear thrust, but Kiba easily dodged it, using his speed as an advantage. Once he got close enough, he slashed both of her hands off. Visor looked at her hands and screamed in pain and anger. Pain mostly. And as you can see, he is an excellent swordsman, Rias said, looking at her knight with a proud smile. You'll pay for what you did, Visor screamed. Rias smiled. Now, second is Kaneko, who is a rook. She specializes as strength and she also had a very high defense. Once Rias finished her explanation on Kaneko's traits, Visor stomped on her. Issei stood though, as well as Rias, were not that worried. Once Issei heard that she had a very high defense, he was sure that she was okay. And okay she was. Visor was then lifted up by, you guessed it, Kaneko herself. Fly, was the only word she said as she threw Visor at a nearby wall. Issei was slightly impressed. For such a little girl, she sure had a lot of power. And finally, there is my queen, Akeno, Rias said. My president, is it my turn to have fun already? I'm going to enjoy this, Akeno said with a sadistic smile. As my queen, Akeno has all the traits of a rook, pawn, knight and bishop. Rias started to explain. When Akeno raised her hand, after she did, lightning immediately struck Visor. The only thing that Visor could do now was scream, as her flesh slowly started to burn. Oh my, you're still alive? That's good, I can enjoy this even more, Akeno said with a giggle. Akeno continued to strike Visor with lightning, each bolt stronger than the other. Akeno specializes in magic mostly. Another interesting fact about her is that she is the ultimate sadist, Rias said. Issei looked at Rias and then at Akeno. How is her being a sadist an interesting fact? Don't worry Issei, she may be like this when fighting, but she is actually very kind to her friends, Rias said with a smile. Fufu, it seems like you are still so full of energy. Can you still take a bit more? Just don't die. The president will have the honor of killing you, Akeno said with a smile. More specifically, a creepy, sadistic smile. Alright Akeno, that is enough, Rias said with a smile still on her face. Akeno stopped her attacks and came back to Rias. She had a disappointed look on her face. Good job, everyone. I am proud of all of you, Rias said to her peerage, in which they all smiled. Suddenly, their eyes widened. Rias looked at them in confusion. She turned around and saw that Visor had one last spear thrust left in her, and she was aiming it for Rias. Visor came closer and closer at Rias with incredible speed. Rias could not move from her shock. Visor had taken such a beating and she is still able to stand. How is that possible? Before Visor could strike Rias, a firebolt came from behind Rias in her peerage. The flames engulfed Visor. She was rolling down on the floor, screaming as she tried to put the fire out. Once she did, she laid down on the floor, not moving, but still alive. Everyone looked to see where the firebolt came from. They saw Issei, arm extended and smoke coming from his hand. Issei, was that you? Who did that? Rias asked. Issei nodded. Thank you for saving me then, Rias said, grateful that he saved her. The rest also smiled at Issei, grateful that he saved their master. Rias was about to turn around, when she heard a familiar voice. Rias Gremory. Since you all had a chance to show us of what you are made of, I would like to show you what my partner can do. It won't be much, since the stray is weak at the moment, but it will be enough to kill her. So I ask, can we deliver the final blow? Diedrich asked. Rias smiled. It's fine by me, Rias said. Diedrich's voice then went quiet. Everyone was quite curious in what Issei would do. Issei took a few steps forwards. He was now a few feet away from Visor. He opened his mouth and closed his eyes. He concentrated a lot of his energy at the back of his throat. Smoke started to come out of Issei's mouth. Once he was sure, he released that energy. Flames came out of his mouth, engulfing Visor full. Her screams didn't last long. Once Issei stopped, there was nothing left of Visor, except her ashes. Issei turned around and saw that they were all staring at him, mouths open. He then sighed, smoke coming out of his nose and mouth. He then turned around and started to walk away from the group. Issei, where are you going? Rias asked him before he could leave. Issei stopped, but did not turn around. He only boiled his hands into fists and walked outside. It was time to get his friend back from the fallen. And there wasn't going to be any mercy. That is it for today, guys. Hope you enjoy. Please leave a like and subscribe for more videos. See you in the next video.